Hello and welcome to the big picture. The incidents in the Jawaharlal Nehru University last week, where some students indulged in sloganeering against the Indian state, has snowballed into a multiple crisis. While it has led to arrest of the president of the JNU Students' Union, Kanhaiya Kumar, who has been charged with sedition, the JNU as a university is being dubbed as a haven for anti-nationals. The surcharged emotions, partly fueled by a section of sensationalist media, has led to some very condemnable incidents like was witnessed yesterday at the Patiala House courts. The attack led by lawyers against JNU teachers, students and many media persons has added a new and dark dimension to the entire controversy. Meanwhile, there is a major debate on whether the students indulging in sloganeering can be charged under laws of sedition, and specifically if Kanhaiya also can be hauled up as is being done for sedition. The other issue of whether this law, a remnant of colonialism, should still continue to be in a free country statute is also an issue. We will discuss all this today with Soli Sorabjee, former Attorney General of India, Prof. Pushpesh Pant, former professor in the JNU, K.N.Bhat, Senior Advocate Supreme Court, Nalin Kohli, National Spokesperson of the BJP, and Vinod Sharma, Political Editor, Hindustan Times. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Sorabjee, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Mr. Sorabjee, you know the question, there are two aspects to this whole debate. One is about whether this boy who has been arrested, the president of the JNU Students' Union, has been rightly charged under sedition. One. Second thing is about whether this whole concept of sedition, the law itself, the statute itself should remain in the statute books, is the second aspect to it. First, can you please address the first question, please?
Look, I'd rather address the second question.
Okay.
Let's be clear about what is sedition. The Supreme Court has made it clear in its judgment in 1962 in K.N.Bhat's case that criticism of the government, however vigorous, however pungent, may be ill-informed, is not sedition. It becomes sedition when the writing or speech has a tendency to disrupt public order and, important, it is violence, promotes violence or is incitement to violence. That's the exact word used by the Supreme Court.
Right.
Now, this is the offense of sedition. It has been toned down. Actually, the Supreme Court was asked to strike down the section, but they did not, but they limited the application of section to these acts and saved its constitutionality. Now, whether this boy, this president, uttered words which are on this side of the line or the other side of the line is to be determined by a court of law. But I would like to say one thing. Please, you can even say the Supreme Court judgment if the Afzal Guru case is wrong. You can say that. That's not sedition.
Right.
I don't believe it. I think he got a fair trial, but there are others who hold different views and are not necessarily Marxists. So therefore, strike a balance between criticism, which does not travel into the forbidden field of incitement to violence. Otherwise, law of sedition will be used to smother and muzzle dissent and difference of opinion, which should be avoided.
Okay. Okay, I think you have made a good start to the whole thing. Nalin Kohli, do you think that the action of the students there, we don't know who the students are, still everybody has not been arrested, we don't know except the president of the Students' Union, Kanhaiya Kumar, you think his action there was inciting violence?
No, I think that is to be determined, because we are trying to constantly look at different videos and juxtapose it as the same event. Like take the video of the 9th. 9th is the day when there was a problem in JNU and these slogans came. 11th is the day when Kanhaiya had another speech in which he's not inciting or speaking anything negative. He's on the contrary, I think he's trolling the Constitution.
Is he speaking on 9th?
I don't know. I'm not the investigating agency.
No, but you said
I'm
that
simply saying that
you're talking about
You've
a
not
video.
heard me fully.
In that video, is he speaking?
As I said, I'm not the investigating officer. I'm not an IO. And I can therefore not take claim for what the Delhi police is investigating. My point goes limited to this. What Soli sir has said is the absolute position on the law of sedition. Now, the comments that are there, and we've all heard the comments, including that Afzal tumhare qatil abhi zinda hai. So, in terms of it, abhi hum sharminda hai. So, that is completely against the due process of law because the Supreme Court has convicted him. So, we need to determine this on the basis of prosecutable evidence. That's the job of the police, which they will look at, and obviously the courts will adjudicate on it. What I was pointing out to the confusion about the two is because now in the age that we live in, the social media being hyperactive, claims, counterclaims, all of it takes it there. But the police is not going to run only by claims and counterclaims. They will look at the evidence and how does it stand the scrutiny of law. And in that context, if Kanhaiya Kumar has a role in what happened, if it broadly falls into the parameters of what is sedition, then they will obviously file a charge sheet.
Okay, Professor Pant, there are two aspects to it. You have lived in that campus
for 4 decades, for 4 decades and more.
You have taught and lived in that campus for 4 decades. Now the question is, there are two questions which I would like to ask you. Nalin is talking about police have to decide. First question, in your experience, you think police should have been allowed to go inside one. Second thing is, now the police will have to decide whether what has happened inside. So what is your stand on that?
Girish, I think my stand on this is very straight. I think JNU is being maligned as a hotbed, a heaven, a sanctuary of Naxalites, secessionists,
Anti-national
and so on, which it is not, certainly not. It is a student population of 8 to 10,000. Even if you take 1% of that at the lunatic fringe, you would have about 80 or 90, a critical mass enough to create a racket or a rioting situation on the campus. But I firmly believe that the university as an autonomous institution should be allowed to take charge of acts of gross indiscipline, and if they feel it is verging on a situation where a breach of peace is imminent, they may call the police. But was it done in this case? As my good friend Nalin very rightly said, he is not an investigating officer. I was not present on the campus that day. I personally was a bit distressed by the right of freedom of expression being abused to an extent to saying, "Hum sharminda hai, Afzal Guru ke qatil jinda hai."
The slogan.
No, but the point is, as Soli very ably points out, there are limits which were probably crossed, but they were not sedition, to my mind. And I think a sledgehammer was used to kill a flea or a mosquito. This is not the first time, let me remind you, when police has been on the campus. But was the police called on campus? Did the police descend on campus on its own? How did the university authorities react to it? How is it that almost all the university community in JNU past present is united, almost with the exception of 10% of partisan people on one side? I think there was a small group of miscreants, maybe not necessarily all JNU students, who were waiting for a provocation to have an action on the campus, which would have a reaction, which would allow the opposition to unite. This is exactly what is happening.
Okay. Mr. K.N.Bhat, Mr. Bhat, before I think...
Yes.
I don't know whether you heard what Sorabjee said, but the question is now, there are two questions. One is about the application of the law of the particular sections in the IPC concerning seditions in this particular case. You think it is justified? And we will come to the larger issue of whether sedition should remain in the statutes at all or not later.
That was considered by the Supreme Court way back in 1962.
Right.
In Kedarnath Singh versus State of Bihar.
Right.
And it was held that the section has to be interpreted in such a way as to mean that only with the intention or the mens rea must be added to the proposition, and only because if somebody does it with the intention of doing whatever has been stated, prohibited actions, then it is valid. And if it is not, generally it is not, so there is no question of re-examining that position. And right from 1962 it has been in the statute book, and I don't see any good reason to re-examine it.
Okay, but what about in the present case? What about in the present case?
Girish, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. What about in the present case, the application of this section in the present case?
In the present case, everything depends upon the facts. in the sense that who said the alleged statement. The alleged statement, as reported in the media, really is seditious. There is no doubt about it. And such statements cannot be just a mere freedom of expression. It is not just criticizing the government. It has been just saying that it is an attempt to overthrow the establishment at various stages. That something is very clear, because if somebody says that Bharat ki barbad hamari azad or something like that, because then I don't know, I think that is far in excess of freedom of speech and expression guaranteed, and that type of freedom we don't need it.
Okay, Mr. Sorabjee, would you agree with that?
So it is for the police to.
Okay, Mr. Sorabjee, would you agree with that? Would you agree that the slogans raised were serious enough to attract the provisions of sedition?
No, but what slogans?
Slogans of Barbadi.
Afghal Guru, Azad Hai, okay, but doesn't agree with it. Deplorable, not sedition. But if they say Afghal Guru ka revenge lega, he's been wrongly convicted. Hello?
Yes. No, the question, sir.
Sorry?
Sir, Mr.
I think
If
all
they
the
say
slogans.
Mr. Bhat, I'll come back to you. Let me finish with Mr. Sorabjee. Mr. Sorabjee, the slogan was, about barbadi of the Indian nation. That
भारत की बर्बादी तक जंग रहेगी, जंग रहेगी.
जंग रहेगी, बर्बादी तक.
Then there is no question. Now, can I speak?
Yes, sir,
who's
please.
interrupting me? If this is so, if these facts are proved, then it would amount to sedition. Because there's a clear invitation to incitement to violence. There's no question about that. But as I said, merely saying the Supreme Court judgment is incorrect is not sedition. We say that about many judgments. People, academics, lawyers also feel that the judgment was not correct. Maybe they're wrong. I think judgment is correct. But if you go further and say that we'll make good the injustice of the judgment by Hindustan ki barbad karenge, whatever you said, my Hindi is not too good, then of course it goes in the realm of sedition.
Okay.
This sort of a speech, freedom of speech, is not permissible.
Okay.
Just to add what Soli sir is saying, and of course we meet him in the court regularly, I think the point is, which is where the debate starts. It starts on the question of 19(1)(a), which is the freedom of expression and speech, and 19(2), which is reasonable restrictions. Beyond that, what he's pointing out is that, which is just to clarify, the issue here is that is it just criticism or is it leading to something more which impacts public order? That's what we need to wait for the investigation.
Incitement of the violence. Yes.
That's what we need to wait for the investigation.
Okay. Vinod.
Well, as Mr. Sorabjee said that it has to be determined and ascertained. Yesterday a major incident happened in the court, in the court premises. Yes, and an FIR has been registered against unknown people.
Right.
Though these people are known.
They're all on the camera.
Yeah, they're all on the cameras. In this case, there was an instant reaction from the highest in the land, namely the Home Minister and the Honorable HRD Minister, which said that nobody who threatens India or talks about breaking up India shall be tolerated and be acted against. And even before the video evidence, whichever evidence is genuine or legitimate, could be studied or ascertained, a sedition case was slapped against the JNU Students' Union President, against whom there is yet not any evidence in public domain that he uttered those words. There is one version that he was present during the meeting, and perhaps presence during the meeting, whether it amounts to abetment and whether it is sedition, has to be determined also, because there are three eminent lawyers on this panel. But the short point I'm trying to make is, and taking from where Professor Pant, who has had a long association with JNU, that in cases like these, I think the report to the police should have been made by the university authorities rather than a member of parliament of the ruling party from East Delhi. Now, he was a complainant here. So, I personally feel that this case could have been handled with more finesse and with a lot of care, because it involved the students of a university. And if students disagree, they are tomorrow's leaders, because disagreement in democracy is essential. And the question, you see, that the right to dissent is essential in democracy, and nobody can deny anybody that right. And the boy who has been arrested, and I don't hold any brief for him, because he belongs to the All India Students Federation. He doesn't belong to the Democratic Students Federation, which actually organized the event.
DSU.
Which actually organized the event. I sincerely doubt whether the policeman or whoever made a complaint, he was really aware that what kind of students' unions exist on JNU and what is the ideological separation between them.
Would you like to react to that?
I think let Nalin Nalin have
See, I think what is happening is we are constantly going back to freedom of expression and speech. I think, again, a little bit of a historical background is important.
No, that's not the hang of my argument.
No, one second. Isn't freedom of expression and speech an issue in this whole matter?
I'm coming. It is. It is also an issue in this. And I'm coming to it. And Soli sir would be able to add a lot to this. But the First Amendment was also where this was discussed as an outcome of the Ramesh Thapar case versus State of Madras.
Right.
Now, just let me put down 4 or 5 slogans, and that's where the incitement comes in. Is basically, Afzal hum sharminda hai, tere qatil zinda hai, tum kitne Afzal maroge, har ghar mein Afzal niklega, Afzal tere khoon se inqilab aayega, कश्मीर की आज़ादी तक जंग रहेगी, भारत की बर्बादी तक जंग रहेगी. Now the point is, this is not ordinary view. It could be a conviction. It may have links, we don't know. Because they are a student, that can't be the way of just turning the other eye. Because if it is having a deeper link, then the matter is concerned. If it is something where there is more than just an enunciation of a thought, if there's intent, they are working on it. If there are links to anything that might lead to a law and order, public order problem, they can't be ignored. So my point is, in this entire thing, this is not a fight against JNU. That's what I want to make it clear.
With all respect.
Just with respect. One sentence. Just a sentence to finish. This is not a fight against JNU. We made it clear. Barring the BJP, in a sense, every party has jumped in to politicize it. Our stand is clear. This is objectionable. Other parties are saying this is objectionable. Our view is that let that be investigated. You are saying no, that this should have been handled only by the...
Why is that?
No, I didn't say that. Yeah. I think that my English has gone bad or...
I'm not referring only to you. I'm not referring only to you.
But the points I was making was very simple. I said that there should have been a preliminary inquiry by the Delhi police before slapping a case of sedition against the president of the Students' Union.
I think that's a fair point which you have made, Mr. Sorabjee. Mr. Sorabjee, you heard all the 5 slogans which Nalin Kohli has mentioned, the 5 slogans which have been raised, because of which all this have happened. You think that any of these slogans, the important thing now is for the police to decide if any of these slogans will lead to incitement of violence, right? Is that the point now?
Yes, but some of the slogans which Nalin recited are clearly incitement to violence. Hindustan barbat karega, and the other things he said. There's no question about it. But the question is, this has to be established in a court of law. I agree, there should have been some preliminary inquiry. I don't think the police really know the meaning of sedition. Criticism of government is not sedition. Critic of government is not one who practices sedition. One who preaches violence for the wrong done to Afzal Guru or for the wrong done to other people is guilty of sedition. Now, this is a clear line, a thin line, but that must be kept in mind. Otherwise, you lose a provision of sedition to muzzle dissent.
Okay.
That can't be allowed to be done.
Okay, Mr. Bhat.
Squash dissent.
Okay, Mr. Bhat, the question is, as Vinod was pointing out, should there have been a preliminary inquiry before a case of sedition was slapped on this boy?
Yes.
You see, in the criminal procedure code, there is no provision for a PE, whereas CBI has a provision for a PE, and then there is a RC, regular case. In this case, whatever is the prima facie looks, you put a case. The thing happens that after the investigation, if it is found that it is not a case of sedition, but it is a case of section 505 or 153A or one of the cases, it will be accordingly modified. Nothing is lost today.
Nothing
There
is lost
no
today.
reason for
Okay.
shouting from the housetop that sedition has been put. Nothing wrong.
No, sir.
Nobody is giving a punishment
You have
today.
slapped a case
It has
of
to be, as
sedition
Mr.
against a
Sorabjee
young
said,
boy. What would be his career prospects thereafter? A case of
so
sedition
what?
even brought and rejected later.
If the young boy has done it, he deserves it.
Sir, there is no
And
evidence
even
in public
if a
domain
young
yet
boy
now.
has committed
There is a
rape,
big
then
if,
he
sir.
nowadays
There is a
is
big
punished.
if. There is a big if. There is a big if.
See,
and what about the lawyers who wrought violence
No, no, I'll
in
come
the
to that.
lower
I'll come
court?
to that. I'll come to that. I'll come
And
to
there is a
that.
case against
established.
unknown
I'll
people.
come to that, Mr.
FIR against unknown people there.
Professor Pant.
Why couldn't there be an FIR against unknown people in this case as
because
well?
this.
Sir, I'll come to you,
This
Mr.
is
Bhatt.
something, I mean, I can't explain to this particular thing. It is always the case when people are not identified X, Y, Z, but it is identified that these slogans have been shouted, an offense is
Bhatt, I'll
made
come
out.
to you. I'll come to you.
Suppose there is a case of murder,
Mr. Bhatt.
but nobody knows that who is committed, then it is a FIR against unknown people.
No, no, that's
Known
fine.
people will come later on.
No, no, that's
These
fine,
are all
sir.
some ordinary
Mr.
things,
Bhatt.
and I am
Okay.
sorry to have to take ignorance.
No, that's not. No, that's not. Mr. Pant, I think it's very unfair what you're saying, Professor Pant.
No, I think, Girish, there are two things here we must very clearly understand. And I think Nalin has made the point very brilliantly. If there is a case which is worthy of investigation as sedition, it should be done and it should be left to the law enforcement agencies. My concern is this happened on a university campus, which
That is the point.
which has had experience of police on it before during emergency Mrs. Gandhi's reign, 1983, and sundry other times.
Yes.
I don't believe that any university is an island where the laws of the land can't operate, shouldn't operate. There is no ivory tower which can survive like that. I think the students in JNU should behave responsibly. They should work more towards study, which is the primary function of a university, rather than undertake all the battles across the. But that's besides the point.
But
In
that
this-
that's always happened in JNU.
No, but in this case, when you say this is the culture of JNU, I also get hurt. In 4 decades, I have not come across freedom of speech abuse like this in my living memory.
You think
at
this
all.
this is a serious case
No.
of freedom, abuse of freedom of speech?
Absolutely, but is it a case of abuse of freedom of expression by JNU students or trespassers
Precisely.
or agent provocateurs is to be decided. And I entirely believe, sincerely believe, that in independent India, laws of sedition from colonial period have no place, but as long as they are on the law book, probably it
My
is
question, sir,
responsible.
very quick, my question is this. He was talking of preliminary inquiry, but rightly points out that in IPC there is no preliminary inquiry, and only
There
CBI
may-
can
all
do it,
right.
police can't do it.
Girish, but in that case, the case should have been filed against unknown people rather than the identified person who's the president of the JNU SU, who probably has a legitimate duty to be present on a campus where if he is found guilty, let him be crucified. But why before that stigmatize him and the university? I think Nalin made a very good point that this is nobody's business to run down JNU. Fair enough. But the point is, it has already incited violence. You say seditious, you blame me for sedition. The case is not proved, but anybody who stands by me is backed up in a court of law.
I'll come to that. Being backed up, Mr. Sorabjee, this is another thing which has happened. The most unfortunate thing yesterday, what happened in the courts. How do you explain the behavior of the lawyers?
Yes. I hang my head in shame. Absolutely indefensible, not indefensible, condemnable. They had no business to behave in that fashion. They are lawyers. They're supposed to be officers of court. And the way they behaved, really, as I said, I thought it was shameful.
And the police have not registered cases against. Identify people have been identified. They're very much on photographs, video evidence are there, Mr. Bhatt. With all that evidence, the case has been filed against unidentified people. Don't you see anything very strange in that?
And
a lot of journalists, journalists have been attacked.
It is a shameful event. It is whoever it is. I mean, it is not the question. The lawyers must hang their head in shame. It is not a defensible act at all, and the police must take action against the people, whoever has done it, and if they, why they are delaying it, I don't know.
But
But they must take action, and it was an absolutely indefensible act on the part of the lawyers.
Mr. Bhat, in the case of JNU, you say that identified people, even just the slogans who raised the slogans have still not been identified. In the case of what happened yesterday in the courts, all of them are identified. Their photographs are there all over the newspaper and it's there on the television. You think that the Delhi police has done the right thing by filing a case against unidentified people?
Wrong. I agree with you that it ought to have been started with so and so and others.
Yes.
Whoever has been identified should have been put together earlier for assault and rioting or whatever is the section of the Indian Penal Code comes in. Case should have been registered, and to begin with it may be against one or two, and thereafter more, if they are involved, more will be added thereon, because it is always happens in a criminal investigation that to start with there will be nobody,
yes,
or one or two, but later on people are added as they are identified. So this should have happened, and I have no defense for the Delhi police as far as this particular inaction or failure is concerned.
Mr. Sorabjee?
Yes. Bolo?
Mr. Sorabjee, that's the same question which I asked, but the way the Delhi police are approaching this whole issue of what happened in Patiala House Courts yesterday.
Yes, I agree. It's very undesirable. I don't know why I'm not doing it. But may I say one thing more?
Yes.
I think Bar Council of India should take action against these lawyers.
Okay.
Debar them.
Okay.
We want lawyers in the profession, not gundas.
Absolutely. Nalin, yesterday there was also a BJP MLA who was there. BJP MLA who is, there all over, everybody is seeing it. The man is bashing up and your party has not taken action against him so far.
Let's go one by one. First of all, what's my respected senior? Because I also practice in the court as an advocate. And what Mr. Bhat has said, Mr. Soli, Sorabjee of course first, and then Mr. Bhat. That's exactly how anyone would feel, because this is not acceptable. Now let's come to the specific case in terms of what you're saying, unknown persons. I think it's a good opportunity for people to join the investigation. People will have photographs, they will have it, hand it over. It's not something to laugh at. It's serious. When it's unknown,
Nalin, you're taking your double standards is very clear.
What double standards? I'm not finished.
In the case of JNU, you say that...
Therefore, now I'm saying, then Girish, with due respect,
yes,
your agenda becomes even worse. Because your agenda is to hang the person. I don't want to talk about due process of law.
There are two instances which have happened within
you have not allowed me to finish. You have proceeded.
It is being handled by the Delhi police in two different ways, and you are not... You don't find anything wrong in that.
I have condemned an incident. I'm taking it further in terms of your question which was there to both the seniors, that it is an unknown person, because the lawyers' photographs, when you're talking specific of lawyers, where I haven't seen, I've seen O.P.Sharma's photographs, I have seen not in the 7 papers I read, a lawyer's photograph.
So therefore, when I know,
therefore you say go and hang a person without knowing
I am not saying hang a person, please.
Double standards.
I'm not saying
I take it as unacceptable.
What about your MLA's case?
No, so therefore, that's why I said your charge is motivated. Because I'm
what
not
about,
going to take a
what about your
charge.
MLA?
Now,
Has your party taken any action against him?
Hold on, I'm coming to my MLA, but I must finish my point on the lawyers thing.
No, we have no time, sorry.
No, but let him answer about the MLA.
Therefore, then why did go ahead and make up your mind?
I think if you don't let him answer about the MLA,
I'm asking him to answer about the MLA.
Please,
that is because you've taken it in the direction by pointing out that I'm having a double standard on the lawyers. I didn't have a double standard, and I won't allow my fair name to be done that. Om Prakash has made a complaint. There is a counter complaint on this. Om Prakash's version is that I was instigated. The counter version is that he has gone ahead and incited violence.
Okay.
So that's where their position is. And of course, it has to be investigated.
He was instigated to beat up certain people
I don't know. I wasn't at the place, so I'm not going to be witness, and I'm not going to comment without knowing the full facts.
May I say that, the first remark
of
the police commissioner was that it was a minor scrap.
Yes.
It has been reported in Times of India today. And there were n number of policemen who were witnesses to what happened on the court premises. So I think that it is really, and as you rightly pointed out, I am not casting aspersion on the entire police force, but they have 2 yardsticks in cases interlinked. One, that they name the person and slap a case against him. The other, a FIR against unknown people, despite it being crystal clear as to who was doing what.
On that note, we need to end. This is as we have seen in the last few days, it has become the most controversial thing in this country. There is a lot of discussion on, and there will be more discussion. We'll wait and watch how things will move forward. Thanks to all my guests Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture same time tomorrow.